Okay, let's look at this. Look at this. Look at this. Flat earthers versus scientists. Can we trust science?
Before we jump in, we've got a huge announcement. A lot of folks have been asking for this for years. We're finally giving you the first ever Jubilee podcast called Radical
No,
Empathy.
no.
That's right.
Right.
So stick around until the end and we'll tell you more about it.
For now, enjoy the episode.
Radical empathy.
The one on my right, sphere, if you think that is the shape of the Earth, point to it now. If you think the other model is the shape of the Earth, point to it now.
2, 1, 0. All engine running. Liftoff.
Christ.
We have a liftoff.
Jesus
32
Christ.
minutes past the hour.
Look at
Liftoff
this
on Apollo 11.
complete, look at this complete madness. Complete batshit craziness.
I don't think, I know for a fact it's a globe.
The Earth is flat.
It's like we have this picture of reality that's a big puzzle piece, and then one of those pieces just wasn't fitting.
I'm always open to having a discussion with someone who is holding a wrong belief like this.
Are you willing to change your mind on this?
I'm not. The evidence is so much.
Nobody wants to be a flat earther, but if you showed me incontrovertible evidence, I would definitely go back. Who wants the ridicule?
Where are you hoping to get from the discussion with the other side?
I'd like to tear them to pieces.
Man, I can't believe there are people who like literally are that dumb. Like you understand, right, that there's like very obvious indications for the existence of like roundness of Earth. Like it's not some sort of hard to grasp concept like relativity or something, you know? It's actually something that's like super basic and like
I'm Jim
just
Underdown, Executive Director
as
of
long
the
as you
Center
got
for
any kind of
Inquiry West in Los Angeles.
as long as you got any kind of proper spatial reasoning capacities, you
And the chair of the CFI Investigations Group.
I'm Spencer Marks, one of the senior members of the CFI Investigations Group, Science Advocate.
I am Madina Yeri. I'm a theoretical physicist, and I'm with the University of Irvine.
I am Wendell Walton. I am a Chief Learning Officer for a young startup.
I'm Shelley Lewis. I'm a graduate of West Point, critical thinker, and jumped out of airplanes.
My name is Dan Glattman. I work as Dan the Waterman in the drinking water filtration industry, and I'm a truth seeker.
Truth seeker.
Flat earthers on the left and my globe earthers on the right.
Jesus Christ. Jesus
Almost
H.
that origin
Christ.
is true for you. I believe the Earth was created by a higher power.
Are they gonna step forward? Oh, they do. Oh, so one of them doesn't. That's funny. What do you think? Comment below. No. I, basically, how would it be created by, like, literally we've got, okay, so like from your point of view, this is already, I mean, okay, like, I could understand that you might believe that Earth was created in a higher power because that's already harder to disprove than, in fact, it's not entirely possible to disprove, unlike flat Earthism, which is basically is possible to disprove. And the way you do it is that, look, if the Earth was flat, then think about it. You've got your plane, right? Which means that everywhere on Earth at the same time, if there's a sun above the horizon, it would be above the horizon everywhere on Earth. Which means from the moment that you're like Skyping with somebody and with that person it's nighttime and for you it's daytime or vice versa, that means that the Earth cannot be flat. Like literally you have to have like the intellect of like a mussel, like, you know, like an oyster, right? To not understand that. Like literally a beetle has better spatial reasoning than you, okay?
Well, I've been a Christian for 30 years, so the Bible is a flat earth book. You have to take it literally.
Okay, well, that's a great argument, maybe in favor of completely discarding the Bible.
Like, for example, in Isaiah, when it talks about how the earth is like a clay wax seal that's stamped with upturned edges, that's just not some fancy story. That's a simile. It is like.
Right, absolutely. And in Isaiah it talks about too, and I'm a Christian, he who sits upon the circle of the earth. There's a difference between a circle and a ball.
Well, exactly. Yeah. If you look at the original Hebrew, it means
Right.
disc.
So there's an old book written by a bunch of illiterate savages. Okay, not illiterate because they actually knew how to write, so I'll take that back. A bunch of unscienced savages who basically wrote something that, if you interpret it literally, would imply flat earthism, versus your evidence that when you Skype with somebody and you it's day and you it's night, that is your options.
Over 200 scriptures in the Bible that point to a flat earth.
And so what? Do you think Skype is faking? Are your friends all lying to you? Is that it? Even if you think your friends are lying to you, then how about you take a plane ride, okay? You take a plane ride to the other hemisphere, take a plane ride to the other hemisphere, and you'll see stars that you never saw before. Like, it doesn't matter. Of course, then that means you gotta, you gotta look at stars, right? You gotta go out at night. First, you go out in the northern hemisphere at night, you look at the stars, and you see, are they, what? You gotta recognize them, okay? So you've gotta recognize the constellations. You've gotta kind of identify all of them. Then, take a plane, go to the southern hemisphere, okay? Have a look at the stars again, and notice how they are different, okay? With flat earthism, that would not be possible because you would, you'd just be seeing the same celestial sphere. Now, owing to a potential phenomenon of parallax, I don't know if that was even the right word to use in this case, but obviously the relative angles of the stars would change if stars were actually really close to Earth. But you'd still more or less notice that it's the same. You wouldn't, and in fact, typically if you go to the southern hemisphere, you will see some constellations which are exactly the same as in the northern hemisphere, which indicates that the constellations are very far away. And at the same time, you'll discover new constellations, which indicates that the Earth is certainly not flat. If not actually spherical, it certainly is facing in different directions depending on where you are. And yeah, then there's ways to also determine that it's spherical. Especially, it's easier to determine along longitude lines or changing in latitude because you progressively it'll be linearly to the amount of distance that you traveled. The stars and all the stuff in the sky will move of an angle that is proportional to the distance traveled, which indicates that if you're traveling along a straight north or south line to the very least, then it's really much a circle, right? And then longitude, you can do the same, but it's just a bit harder because then it requires you to have a knowledge of time. But if you've got an accurate clock, or of course, if you have a friend or a bunch of friends all across different longitude lines that you can talk to, then they will be able to ascertain that it is indeed all these different times. So unless you think that they're all lying to you, that will be additional proof of the sphericity in the longitudinal direction.
So this notion that you need God or some higher power to create the earth or the universe is very old and was initially posited by people of a pre-scientific age. Since then, we have learned quite a bit about the universe coming into existence, when that happened. Modern humans don't get their cosmology, they don't get their physics, they don't get their knowledge of the universe from the Bible or any ancient text.
It's sort of like the God of the gaps. Once, people used to believe that lightning was God's wrath and throwing these lightning bolts, but once we understood it was a natural process, God shrank a little bit more because now we couldn't attribute those lightning bolts to God. We had to attribute that to the real science. The other thing, the point about the Bible specifically for me is, why is that one particular text the correct one? You choose to believe that, and that's fine, but there's so many other writings and so many other books, so why weren't they correct? Why is just the Bible correct?
Well, what you'll find in a lot of these ancient religions is they're all flat earth religions. All their cosmology goes back to being a flat Earth with an enclosed system. So
Yeah, kind of. They've got like these sort of East Asian religions have sort of more like big stuff. You have this idea of all these other sort of worlds and stuff, but beyond that, yeah, I do agree that it's probably more flat Earth-ish. And I think that probably most religions would be flat Earth-ish just because it kind of looks flat, you know. You just kind of get the impression that it's flat. So yeah.
it's not just the Bible that teaches this. It's many different religious books.
So
Okay, well, again, further evidence that you should just drop all religion.
one problem I have is to trying to explain phenomena happen in nature by holy
I'm still
books.
recording.
Those are religious books. Those
Yeah.
are not books of science. And it is wrong to infer or deduct scientific readings out of those books.
It's wrong to deduct anything out of those books. It's just like stuff that people are pulling out of their ass. You know? It's like literally nothing more than that. So why
wherever.
like why would you even care what the
ASB,
religions
helping
say?
you get one
Like,
step
they,
ahead.
They have no authority whatsoever. They don't know what they're talking about. Just a bunch of
My name is
random
Wendell.
crazy people.
I am a logical, biblically based, and scientific flat earther. I didn't start out, and no one starts out as a flat earther, but I had a lot of questions.
Some people do.
So I actually got to the point where I had to go out and
I
put
can't
my own
believe that
eyeballs
you'd
on
actually
it.
start out
So
from being
we went
not
out
a flat
to an
earther,
observation at Salton Sea,
and
things just didn't add up down there. So we've gone back probably a dozen times, and I can guarantee you.
why'd you bother doing a complicated thing like going to the Salton Sea when there's all the stuff that I already explained to you about like the sky and stuff, right? Why are you gonna do something complicated like that? Why are you gonna like send a rocket up and just there's no need for that, you know?
That
No
there is
need.
no curvature over distance.
The internet has played an important role in confirming my view of this topic.
Let's see.
That's the problem.
Okay, so basically, these people are going onto crazy flat Earth websites, and they're actually believing the crap that they're saying. See, I would have thought that with the internet, people would get wiser because they'd be able to get their info from different sources and be able to tease out what's true and what's wrong. But actually, that's a mistake because most people are just too idiotic to be able to actually determine what's right and what's wrong. In fact, this is why I am having to do this right now, this whole doing these videos, because most people, even relatively smart people, even plenty smart people, in fact, are just completely unable to actually ascertain and determine what's true and what isn't. And in fact, having access to more information doesn't even seem to be helping. And in fact, well, you'll notice that often there are lots of very intelligent, very, in fact, erudite, very well-read people who are still massive idiots. And the reason for that is because just knowing lots of stuff and just having a lot of computing power, just having a high IQ and having lots of knowledge doesn't actually provide you wisdom. It doesn't confer you rationality. And so you can actually be still completely horrendously wrong.
We have the advantage of information today that's outside of channels 2, 4, and 7 and the few networks that are corporately owned. It's pretty easy to say YouTube isn't research, but when you spend enough time, you're picking up quite a bit. And with the discussion groups, panels, we've gone against opposition. We've opposed ourselves. Surprisingly enough, flat Earth is its own worst enemy. So it's not that easy for us to come to consensus. And we find that consensus is orchestrated and not actual.
No, it's not. See, and this is why I'm saying, like, people, like, literally, you can't actually allow democracy in a kind of society like this. I mean, I'm all for democracy, but for a democracy when people are rational. The fact that there's such a strong proportion of people who believe in flat earthism shows that democracy simply is doesn't work. Like, to me, I personally, I mean, it's obvious to me that a flat earther should not be given the vote, right? Because like a mental illness prevents one from being allowed to vote because one isn't able to make a proper decision. And so flat earthers, obviously, it's like one of the most basic aspects of existence is the roundness of Earth, right? It's like one of the most fundamental things. So if you aren't even able to get that right, certainly won't be able to get much more like involved things that like politics. So I absolutely think that you know, we should completely ignore whatever a flat earther might say with respect to politics. And of course, well, most flat earthers are Republicans, and in general, well, we know that Republicans tend to just believe in completely crazy stuff beyond flat earthism. Even if they aren't flat earthers, they'll be crazy in other ways. And so I mean, that's the thing. I think by and large, most Republicans should be allowed to vote. I think even most Democrats are still Nazis, so they shouldn't be allowed to vote either. Socialists, they keep denying that socialism doesn't work particularly well as an economic system, but it does still function to some extent. So uh, I would actually still let them vote. Um, and like I don't know, all these weirdo identity politics people are also actually Nazis, even though they want to do the right thing, but they're still doing Nazis. So uh, they probably shouldn't vote either. So basically, there's not many people left who'd vote. And if you eliminate all those people, would you just end up with a bunch of actual rational people who'd come up with way better policies and would just make the world a far, far better place. However, I don't actually advocate for doing that in practice because uh, it will lead to chaos. And what I advocate for instead is just actually managing to brainwash people. See, most people are so idiotic that they can't actually ever figure out things through logical thinking. So they basically just have to be brainwashed into whatever belief they have. So my solution is just to brainwash people into believing factual truth. Even I mean, it's silly, right? Like they should be able to come up with factual truth on their own. They should be able to recognize it through rationality, but I don't think they're capable of that. So the next best thing is just to brainwash them into believing what they would believe in if they were able to think rationally.
Scientific in any way.
You know, my grandfather used to tell me growing up, never believe anything you read in the newspaper, right? He told that to me. Now, with the age of the internet, it's like, you know, how much of this misinformation are you getting there? And when you have like eyewitnesses taking video of something, you do have to take everything with a grain of salt. That's why, because of my multimedia background, I knew that all that stuff could be faked. You know, take it into Photoshop, take it into After Effects.
It doesn't matter. Doesn't matter because of the arguments I gave you.
Okay, this is at the core of the issue of why there are so many flat earth believers out there right now. The problem is the information from someone who decides to start a website or produce a YouTube video is not reliable. When I have a toothache, I go to a dentist. When my car breaks down, I go to a mechanic. When you have questions about cosmology, you should go to an astrophysicist, you should go to a physicist, you should go to people who have spent years and years studying these ideas, not some 6-minute YouTube video. There is a percentage of people that if they saw a YouTube video that was not within their scientific chops to refute on the face of it, would believe anything out there.
One of the things I will say is NASA.gov has their own documents out there that we get to vet, which is through the Freedom of Information Act. And would you agree that NASA documents, if they're on display, that we should be able to go and research inside there?
NASA is not proving that the Earth is flat.
Well, they say it in 14 of the documents.
You should read what NASA says, and you should listen to what NASA
I would
says.
love to see your NASA evidence that the Earth is
It's
flat.
only their contradictory issues
Okay,
that
let's
bring
see.
us here.
We're all familiar with the Earthrise photo, right? The Earth is rising over the moon. We're all familiar with it. That's a NASA. You can go out to NASA's site. You can download the original, right?
I already know what
Again,
you're going to ask.
like,
So,
who cares? Who cares? Even if the moon landing was fake, like that we can't even maybe particularly prove. That is harder to prove. Like the roundness is something completely much more easy to prove. Like it doesn't matter. You don't need this sort of complicated stuff like that. See, it's not a complex issue at all. The roundness is not a complex issue
Bring
at
up
all.
the luminance on it, and you can see where it's cut out and pasted there.
And like literally how, and if you've ever just done a round the world plane flight, how do you think that works? You know, like the roundness was already obvious well before, like, you know, Copernicus like got burned to the stake for for claiming that the Earth rotated or orbited around the sun, right? Nobody got like burned for claiming that the Earth was round, as far as I know, because already for centuries before Copernicus, or at least for a couple centuries before then, more or less, people knew Earth was round, and it was certainly completely proven when the first circumnavigation of the globe occurred with Magellan, right? So,
showing us doctored images that are clearly doctored. The blue marble is a very famous image from 1972. When you talk to the artist from NASA, his name is Robert Simmons, he talks about exactly how it was created from data, and it's not a photograph whatsoever. He added clouds.
Let me explain.
He added a highlight of the sun.
If you take, on your phone, most phones have that panoramic image. When you do that, you're taking a series of pictures, and the phone cleverly stitches that together.
I'm just saying how it's presented. It's presented as a real photograph.
So when NASA takes real photos, and they either clean them up for color, or they stitch them together so it's one large image, it doesn't mean they're CGI.
You're talking about composites.
oh Jesus Christ, I gotta get ad block at this point. I'm sorry. I'm really sorry for this, but anyway. Again, who cares? Like that, his point is exactly that. The last time I got ad block, it didn't work properly, so.
I'm what you call a globe denier. You could even get me into a virtual construct if I can't find the borders myself.
What shape would you say you think the Earth is?
It appears to me to be a stationary plane. As opposed to the vastness of infinity of space, I would find it to be an ice plane where we have a localized sun and our environment thrives there. These particular people have misled us on television. This is a brilliant opportunity to speak. We've been suppressed, censored by mainstream media. Alternative media is just a thing of beauty for me.
Jesus Christ.
I view the other side as uneducated.
I'm running.
They think they are uneducated?
I'm running for this.
Well, they certainly think they're educated.
And they're following
Jesus.
quite a bit of the university system, what
They're
we
just
call
being like
scientism.
polite.
Right, scientism.
Obviously,
oh my God,
is the belief
scientism.
in what's written,
Jesus.
where we tend to be exploring in the field
Jesus
with
Christ.
physical properties, not theories of any kind. We're using actual measurements
Okay, I'm kind of sick
that
of
are
this at this
calculated
point,
not
and I
by
wanna
our
get myself
guidelines,
my
but the
ad block, so
guidelines
I'm
of
just-
science as we know it.
I'm
I can
stopping
only
this.
hope they're uneducated as opposed to disingenuous.
Well, that's the other thing too, because we know that
Jesus Christ. Jesus